Boy, I sure hope we're live. I think we're live.
I'm gonna check.
You'll
right
never
now.
know.
I'm checking.
We're totally live.
I'm checking.
We're absolutely totally live. Look at this. See, we're live.
I hear myself.
Right here. See.
I hear Dave.
Hi.
That's not live because it's kind of live because now you're holding the phone with your
Well,
face holding the phone, and then it just goes and goes and goes, and that's terrifying.
It's what isn't there a name for that thing? Like, I want to say MC Escher, but I know that's not right. That's more the staircase thing. But what is that thing called when it's like the infinite mirror thing?
If Sean was here, he would know, but Sean unfortunately is absent, so
Let's talk about that for a
he
moment.
can't be
Sean-
here to tell Dave that Dave's stupid for not knowing the answer.
Isn't there something like Sean has given me so much shit over the years because I have had, some sort of either family commitment or work thing or something other, and Sean just like destroys me every single time. I don't even know what he's doing right now. He can probably hear me is my thought. And I don't even know what he's doing. And I don't care because it's not a good enough excuse.
what I like is this is a chance for you to go off. It does happen a lot when you're not here, so I think go off, King.
Yeah, I think the floor is yours for Sean's opening monologue.
I mean, what does it feel like to just have, he says he works so hard for the show and then completely just blow it in the next 2 weeks where he just doesn't show up. Like he puts this whole thing forward about, what have you done for the show? Yeah. Have you done this for the show? Yeah. Have you done this? Oh, wow. You haven't done that. That's weird. Do you spend X amount of time thinking about the show? Oh, do you show up, Sean? Do you? That's an interesting question to answer, isn't it?
Now, this is going to backfire tremendously the next time you're gone, but I think for the time being, you
Which
might
is
as well
2
enjoy
weeks
it while
from
you
now,
can.
probably. 2 weeks from now, probably, but it'll be due to work. But
Which I
Yeah.
believe is why he's also not around. I believe it's due to work.
He said he was working on something. I assumed it was for the show. That's why I couldn't understand.
I assumed it was for work.
I don't know. Who knows? Whatever. He's got like 17 jobs. It's fine.
I feel like given the topic of this week, it has to be something significant.
Who knows? Who knows?
And the topic of this week,
I'm actually sad. I want his opinion.
the
Go, Chris.
topic of this week is basketball, and you're like, oh God, turn it off. No, hold on. It's not even really about the Suns that much. We'll talk about them a little bit, but it's more so about what it says at the top. Because, I mean, I don't think it's being like a prisoner of the moment to say what I did at the top there. Just because there was absolutely no leaks whatsoever, and the fact that it's a player of this age and magnitude. I mean, maybe there's examples of like some weird soccer transfer or something that I don't know about outside the big four, but like, I don't know. I mean, this was so bad that it had people convinced that Sham's account was hacked. And then it's been
included.
10 days since then, and people still think it might have been hacked, even though Luka has now played in a Lakers uniform.
The fact that I'm going to be burned in your guys' head permanently, having text you being like, wait, what the fuck's going on? And I thought you guys were going to have known because it was like a couple minutes old. And I was literally in Buffalo Wild Wings picking up dinner after a wedding because I was hungry again, going back to my hotel room, and it flashed up on the screen in there, and I thought I was hallucinating. So we drive the 2-minute drive to our hotel from the Buffalo Wild Wings as I'm on my phone, and Raya, my fiance, is like driving in, and I was like, I can't get out of the car. She's like, well, I'm like, because I need to double check that this is a real thing before I send it to like 8 people who then tell me I'm passing fake news. And I was like, I need to verify this over and over again. And so the 3 of you were the first ones I sent it to. Because I was like, I think I said, like, what the hell is this? Or what the hell just happened? Thinking it was bullshit. And you guys were going to be like, yeah, that's nothing. And then all of your responses were like, is that real? And I was like, okay, that's exactly what I was asking myself. And it was just that was a surreal 15 minutes when, again, I don't even care about basketball nearly as much as you guys do. But being in that and then texting 2 other group messages who also hadn't seen it yet, I was like, oh, cool. I'm glad I felt normal that I wasn't the only one who was like, what the fuck just happened?
So it's funny that everyone's got their little bit of story of like where they were, because that proves, Chris, I think that you're right in saying it's maybe the most shocking trade in sports history, because everyone's kind of got I remember exactly where I was when this happened, the Mark McGwire breaking the home run record type of thing in sports. I was watching a show we were watching Shrinking. Courtney and I were finishing season 2 of Shrinking, and it was on, and then you text me, I look at my phone, I'm like, wait, that can't be real. No, That's not real. There's zero chance that's real. I ruined the rest of the night. Like we had a whole evening like we're gonna try to finish the season. I didn't watch. Nope, I was done. I could the evening. I was up till 2:30 in the morning, like reading everything I could, trying to figure out what the fuck just happened because everything got ruined because I was done. And I'm pretty sure Courtney's pretty pissed off at me. And I'm sorry, it was that big of a deal. I could not even I couldn't consume enough trying to figure out how the hell something like this happened.
I was trying to go back to the hotel room to watch the Royal Rumble, and I was like, I can't get off my phone right now.
What's interesting about this? Well, I mean, first of all, let's go backwards for a second. For the non-sports fans out there, Luka Doncic has come up a lot in this show over the past 6 years.
We hate his guts.
Not a big fan. The Los Angeles Lakers have come up, not as much as Luka, but quite a few times, especially in the finals run year. You probably know who the Los Angeles Lakers are. If you don't even know who the Lakers are, I don't know how you managed to make it to this podcast in the first place. But the Mavericks essentially traded a generational superstar, no matter how much we dislike Luka, the fact remains that he is that, for Anthony Davis, who is certainly a very, very good player, just not quite on that tier. And then some scraps. The Lakers only had to give up 1 first-round pick, not 2, which was the most they could have given up. And they gave up 0 pick swaps in this deal. They also did not give up Austin Reeves or Dalton Connect. They just gave up they gave up Anthony Davis and Max Christie and 1 first-round pick. And that was it. And this happened, again, as I alluded to at the beginning, out of nowhere. There were 0 whispers, no leaks whatsoever. The degree to which that was controlled is going to be interesting because stories keep changing in the aftermath, I think because, in particular, the Mavs front office is trying to save face. In theory, what we're supposed to be believing is that it was just GM and owner on both sides, that everybody else was kept out of the loop so it could be a secret, and then all of a sudden, at 10:40 on a weeknight, we had this trade dropped on us, the news out of nowhere, 5 or 6 days before the trade deadline. Not a last-minute thing, not a panic thing, something that people had been talking about for about a month, if you believe reports, and yet for everybody else, no one had any clue.
It's one of those things that we mentioned the level of shock that it is. The stories that came out initially where it's like, oh yeah, the Mavs ownership only called the Lakers and only wanted to deal with the Lakers. It's like, what sort of collusion do you have going on right now? Do you understand the market that you would have created? Yes, of course. Then Luka would find out about it and blah, blah, blah. All these things could happen. It's like, yeah. Do you understand that Luka could probably get his arm chopped off right now and the team would probably be like, we can reconnect it. Yeah, we'll trade 4 first-rounders. No problem. Like, that's the level of player he is at this. 25-year-olds don't get traded, not at his level, where he's 5 years in a row All-NBA at 25 years old. No, they don't get traded like that. But yet, here he is, being traded, and not even a market set for it. It's just so weird. And I don't blame the Mavericks fans, of which I've had my problems with. I don't blame them for being, just giving up on the team at this point. It's that difficult to fathom.
It blew up everything, and it's not entirely clear why. If you were worried about Luka's conditioning, which is certainly a fair point because Luka is fat sometimes, there is some merit to that. But despite the fact that he was fat last year, he dragged them to the NBA Finals, so it probably wasn't that. If it's the fact that he was becoming more injury-prone, in part because his conditioning sucked, okay, but you traded for one of the most injury-prone players of the generation in Anthony Davis, so
who?
It couldn't really be that. Who then immediately played 3/4 of one game and got hurt, and might miss the rest of the season. It's not clear yet. It's at least several weeks. So it doesn't make sense in the short term. In the long term, I mean, you could have made this trade anytime in the next 4 or 5 seasons. Yes, there was some hesitance around the Supermax that was coming for something like 5 years, 360 million-ish. It was just a ton of money. But to Dave's point, you didn't create a market. What would the Thunder have given up? We'll never know. The Thunder have this war chest of picks and promising young players, the type of deal that we saw, ironically, them kind of get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from when they facilitated the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard situation in the Clippers, who then gave up, I think, 5 firsts and 2 pick swaps or something in there, some combination of just a massive haul of draft picks to get 1 first-round pick and, yes, a borderline top 10 player in Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic is just, it feels like criminal malpractice.
That's what I was going to pitch because I was curious about the deal that what the Lakers paid to get Davis versus then sending Davis out to get Luka. Because Sean and I were talking about this last week when we weren't on the show, and I was fascinated by the fact that That was 3 first-round picks that the Lakers had to send out just to get Davis, one of which was the 4th pick overall in that coming draft, along with Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, and Josh Hart. So the Lakers had to give up significantly more to get Davis years ago. Now the older, not as good version, 6 years later, 1 pick and 1 other player to get Luka, who, if you made the trade, if it was all the stuff that they traded for Davis at the time and got Luka, I know it doesn't work because timelines and things like that, and the players are in different positions. You would have looked at the trade that what they gave up to get Davis and be like, all right, well, these are 3 first-round picks in there. That's what your response would have been, including the 4th overall pick in the draft that's just about to happen.
And Ingram turned out to be a pretty good player.
Exactly.
Like, there's a few parts.
And so the fact that a 5-year-old, 6-year-old trade is that much better than the guy who they got who's 6 years older and 6 years more injury prone, coupled with it's like, there's no fucking way to grasp how god awful of a franchise disastrous move it is. I mean, they could find a player that's like 80%, 90% of Luka with that pick, and you're still like, well, you still fucked it because you could have had so much more than just that 1 pick. They could nail that pick, and people are still going to say, well, you still fucked this up. It's the same thing. Well, I mean, it's at a much lower scale, but like the Gasol trade to the Lakers looked like shit. Marc Gasol turned out to be really good, and everyone still looks back and says, yeah, but no one knew who the fuck he was, and he was fat and out of shape himself when you made that trade. Like, just because the result turns out okay doesn't mean the process wasn't a fucking nightmare.
The way this panned out, you could say that Mikal Bridges was a better trade asset than Luka Doncic, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Shouldn't be said.
But
It shouldn't be said.
That's the confusing part to me. Rudy Gobert, there were either 4 or 5 first-round picks in that trade. Mikal Bridges, there were 5. There is a certain market seemingly set, which is basically unload your draft capital. Whatever you have, because the Lakers could have only traded 2 first-round picks instead of 1, but whatever you've got, pick swaps, etc., you're giving them to us because you're getting the best player in this trade, so that's the expectation. Now, again, none of them had a player coming back as good as Anthony Davis, but that is still no excuse whatsoever for what happened here. And like you said, it's hard to blame Mavs fans, who now the ownership is now like throwing fans out of the building. Again, we saw the debut last night with Luka and LeBron playing at the same time, and it was pretty interesting to watch, I have to admit, even though, fuck the Lakers. So, like, we've seen it in motion now. It was already something you could picture in your head, but again, now we saw Luka in a bright yellow uniform, and that finally drove home the point of, like, yeah, this actually happened, and for some reason, once again, the Lakers franchise has been the beneficiary of it.
Because there's only so many ways to get a superstar in the NBA. People, I mean, unless you gut your entire roster tank and you have enough space for 2 supermaxes or whatever. I don't even know how the fuck it works anymore. I'm talking like 8 years ago, the way people would bottom out, clear their entire cap, then try and sign 1 or 2 guys, and then build a roster of, minimum contracts, MLE, whatever the fuck it was back then. So like the only way the Lakers can do this is if they ship shit off of their current roster. So you just, again, LeBron has however many years left, but the Lakers, who perpetually get to have a superstar player find a way onto the roster, they worked the system to get LeBron and have the space and all this crap, which again, you deal with signing trades and all that. So naturally, this is where they end up again. And again, you talk about the collusion-y shadiness of it is, well, the guy who's the Mavs GM and the guy who's the Lakers GM have an interesting past together. So it makes you think.
I like to put myself in the position of what a Mavs fan must feel like. I can only imagine this is along the lines of if after in 2022, they just said, all right, well, we're going to trade Devin Booker. We're going to trade Devin Booker away for, I'm trying to think of it, not even Chris Middleton in a first-round pick. It's like, what the fuck? Like, great player, like good player, I guess, but what is going on here? Like, this is like it gutting to the point of I don't know that I want to be a fan of this team anymore. And there's some rumors out there that maybe the Mavs owner is like trying to move him out and they want to get rid, they want to build a casino there, but Dallas won't let them build it there. So therefore he's now going to force their hand by saying, I'm going to move. And there's the precedent of Seattle saying like, oh, well, guess what? If you don't do what we want, we'll just move the team to where they will. So there's some real shady stuff that's going on, but like this is just the most disgusting part of sports where you let someone come in, buy the team, and then just wholesale gut punch you by getting rid of your best player because he doesn't want to pay the max. And there's legit concerns with Luka's his conditioning and things like that. And is he really worth $350 million? But where the NBA economy is, he is. He's absolutely worth $350 million.
The catch is there's no such thing as an untradeable contract. We've learned it. So you can say, I don't want to pay Luka. We're scared of the Supermax, blah, blah, blah. Okay, 2 years into the thing, Luka's fatter than ever and injury prone than ever. So you're telling me you couldn't get borderline this exact deal 2 years from now when he's fatter and more injury prone? Would you be able to make this exact same trade of Anthony Davis 2 years older to the Lakers then on the Supermax, however the money works? Would you still be able to do it? Absolutely you would. There's no question you could trade. I mean, he would have to have such a catastrophic knee injury that his leg is maybe going to be amputated for someone to not trade what they just traded on the off chance he gets back to being healthy.
Well, we might have found one contract in the NBA that's untradeable, but we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that later.
I suppose that's true.
Now, today, like this afternoon, a story leaked that perhaps it was not only the Lakers that were in consideration for a Luka trade. Today, there were also multiple different reporters saying that there were two other teams that were rumored as possibilities, Milwaukee and Minnesota. And it doesn't take like Einstein to figure out what would have been involved in those deals because like the Bucks are not giving up Middleton and Portis and whatever the hell for Luka. It would be Giannis. And I would assume it would be Anthony Edwards from Minnesota because I don't think the Mavs wanted Rudy Gobert. I don't think those rumors make them look any better. So if this was Dallas's front office leaking this, I don't think it helps one fucking bit. Because again, you're looking to trade this to teams that have a combination of good young assets and a lot of picks and pair them with the other players that you have left. Like, again, the Thunder, who you play Luka with SGA and you go, okay, now both of our top stars are like top 3 and under 26. So we'll see how this works, right? Because they could unload multiple good young players and all their picks and be just fine. Well, the problem is now you have these other two teams that, again, like why, if you're so down on Luka that you're willing to make a trade like this and you then leak that you're all these reasons to make it look like you had a good idea, his conditioning sucks, his commitment to the organization was in question, blah, blah, blah. Why would you expect to get back Giannis or Anthony Edwards in a trade for Luka? Why? Exactly. You can even argue whether Luka's better than Giannis on a given day. He's younger, but they're probably like 2 or 3 behind Jokic in some order or SGA. As far as who's better in the league, Anthony Edwards is top 10 now, but it's also a younger player without the injury or character issues you're worried about. So if that was Dallas's front office that leaked that, and I don't know why Luka's side would, they're still not helping themselves, and they're still fucking stupid.
I mean, at that point, I'd rather take if I'm a Mavs fan, I want the Timberwolves deal. I want Edwards and a pick and another player. Like, I mean, I'm like in a heartbeat. I'm like, absolutely, I want that trade. So why are you leaking that this would be like, it could have been struck? I think there's a chance I'd rather have Anthony Edwards straight up than the package the Lakers did. So I'm like, if it was a 1-for-1, sign me up. If that's what I have to do, then okay. But again, and then never mind the fact that, you know, the worst case scenario for Davis happens 3 quarters into his Mavs career, which, you know, really just feels like a Hollywood typical writing of like, oh yeah, that figures. We knew that where it was going.
You bring up a funny point of like, yeah, if you actually offered Anthony Edwards for Luka straight up, a Mavs fan would be like, oh, I don't like that because Luka's our guy and he's probably better, but at least we have something to cheer for. Now you have literally nothing to cheer for anymore. Exactly. Like, no, nothing. It's gone.
And that's where like your relocation major league type of let's gut the team, make it have no support, blah, blah, which is interesting. It's been interesting with Vegas being rumored to have an expansion team. Of course, LeBron wants in on that. It's weird that LeBron's in a weird position related to this trade with the ownership in Dallas that wants to do this and all those weird factors and all that. I mean, nonetheless, like an NBA team's going to be in Dallas. I can't fathom. I think I was telling Sean, I can imagine a scenario where the Mavs relocate. I can imagine a scenario where we put an expansion team in Vegas and the ownership of the Mavs trades the franchise. A new owner comes in to take over Dallas. They are already an established owner. Now they get the Vegas team. That has happened, I think, in a couple weird circumstances around sports leagues over the years where you basically trade ownership for a new city and then an owner who wants to keep the team in that city comes in. And that is even still conspiracy theorist crazy in the first place. Everyone's looking for an answer for, this was a stupid trade and you guys panicked because you didn't want Luka to find out that you might shop him and then have his side get involved and then you sent him to, oh no, I guess you sent him to the Lakers. Like, I mean, you But again, he also got fucked in this deal with the Supermax and taxes and all these things. Look at, well, he gets to be a Laker. He got fucked over in the situation and individually.
Lost something like $120 million.
Yeah.
Which,
That
you know,
much.
he doesn't need $120 million more dollars. But is he, in an NBA sense, worth that $120 million more? Fuck yes, he is. So you did fuck him over. You fucked up the market. Like, there's so many layers of like, again, I don't feel like we're going to hear the end of this for a long, long time because of the implications of so much of what you guys have already said in terms of franchise and value. And can the Mavs bounce back from this from a fan base? And shouldn't the union be pissed about this because they're getting a player, one of their marquee players is getting fucked over money wise? There's so many layers to it.
And you know, it's funny you mentioned the ownership situation and trading everything. I think, especially if you were a Vegas person, wouldn't you rather have a brand new ownership than this shitty Mavs ownership?
The city,
because I don't.
I was gonna say, as a person who consumes way too much Las Vegas news, this family is not like liked in Las Vegas for the shit they've pulled. I don't believe. I could be reading the wrong things. I don't think these people are really popular in Las Vegas, so I don't think that people want. Yeah, the Mavs owners. Yeah, I don't think that they would really want them to come in. I mean, granted, I believe the family owns one of the newspapers in Las Vegas, so I suppose that makes it easier for you. But I don't
write some good press.
But I don't think that that's a group that you really want coming in. No, I think if you're Las Vegas, you want LeBron and LeBron being the figurehead and a bunch of rich people coming in when LeBron's career is done to be your fucking ownership. Never mind, you know, they're working on the arena and maybe being on the Rio's land and things like that. There's a lot of people want to have a team in Vegas. The Mavs ownership is not first in line right now. They may think they are because they own a team, but who knows what's actually going on behind the scenes.
And Vegas already has a recent example of getting an expansion team and having it be successful quickly. Now, the NBA's rules for expansion are unlikely to be as generous as the NHL's, but nonetheless, they already have a recent example of, give us a new team, a new identity, we'll start fresh. And so for multiple reasons, there's they would not want the Mavericks there.
And an owner, by the way, mind you, what Las Vegas's ownership does in hockey is spend a fuck ton of money. They literally circumvent the cap to get as many players in as possible, and they fucking pay their people. Like, that's why the Mavs, the Knights are successable. You want an ownership coming in who just refused to pay the top 5 player in the NBA the contract he deserves?
That's this is a bigger extent, but that example would be a bigger extent. But like what just happened in hockey with Phoenix and Utah, like I am more hopeful that Phoenix ends up getting a expansion team if I want to be a hockey fan in Phoenix, rather than sticking with this shitty ownership team that just moved itself up to Utah. If I were a Utah fan, I'd be like, I'll wait 5 more years. It's fine. Let's get a better ownership situation.
Which they did. They have the Jazz owner taking over the team, and then Morello goes away. Utah lucks out, but that's actually a good example. He effectively traded the existing Coyotes franchise, becoming Utah, for an expansion franchise. And then because everyone hates him and he knew he failed, he cashed out and he opted to not have it. So he robbed Phoenix of a hockey team, and then I don't know if they'll ever get one again, and they probably will. We got to figure out an arena and all that shit. But that effectively is exactly what I'm talking about with trading an existing team for an expansion team in a way, which was the deal they cut. Honestly, I forgot that was actually exactly what they did. Thank you, Dave.
Every once in a while I got a gem, but it's when you look at shocking trades like this, I don't know that there is any more of a potential shock. There's been big ones that have been like in history, but like today is so different than what it used to be. Like you look at like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar being traded to the Lakers back in the 70s. It's like, that's a huge deal. That's a guy who already won a championship, best player in the league type of stuff getting traded. That was a big deal, but that was also, there's a huge financial difference back then. There's not a salary cap. There's not equity of funds being distributed amongst teams. Baseball stuff, I'm trying to think if there's any baseball trade. Like, I can't think of anything that even comes close to this as far as the what just happened type of deal. Like, there's been other trades that have been surprising, but not this.
Here's one more aspect too. This is famously the player empowerment era. And players for the last 5 or 6 years in particular have been not just demanding out with increased frequency, but also demanding a specific destination. And I think Sean and others would say that that's been a bad thing for the league overall. It's created a lot of excitement in the trade deadline and the offseason, a lot of drama. The NBA thrives on drama, but it's also been bad because teams seem to have no loyalty to its players, but vice versa, right? Like, players don't have loyalty to teams. That was not the case here. This is almost like the reverse of it. He lost a ton of money on it, like we already mentioned, and he seemed to have no interest in leaving Dallas whatsoever. So despite being in this era where everybody else is like, well, I want out and I want X, this is a player who did not demand a trade and just got shipped out anyways for reasons that are hard to understand, which makes it all the more baffling. If this was 10 years ago and this trade happens, it would be very shocking. Happening in 2025, after all the other stuff that superstars have pulled in the last 5 years, is very confounding.
I'm trying just to, I don't know. I'm really trying to just put myself in the position of how I would feel if this were my team, because I'm glad it's not. I can't.
I wanted to play devil's advocate and be like, okay, but yeah, like what if Luka in 2 or 3 more years starts to break down? He's a shell of himself and all that. And then Anthony Davis got hurt immediately. And I was like, man, I couldn't even try to play the devil's advocate side of like, oh yeah, you could have gotten more, but like, I don't even fault the idea of wanting to trade him. Like, I if those are genuine concerns, that's fine. But he's going to have a big-ass market, and you can get so much more. And going to that franchise with the weird relationship between the GMs, for the tiny package that it is, for a player that's injury-prone, who then immediately gets injured. Because, again, if the Mavs turned around and were like, okay, fine, well, we're going to blow it up and break the team, tear the entire team down. They didn't trade Kyrie. He's still there. Like, you didn't start over again and decide to tear the team down. Are you going to flip Anthony Davis? What are you going to get for him if you want to flip him in the offseason for parts to keep kind of breaking the team down and keep accumulating shit? Which, if that's the goal you want to do, that's fine. But Anthony Davis was the guy you decided to like take in for. Like, again, same logic. You trade Luka straight up for Anthony Edwards. How much are you going to get for Edwards if you decide to just strip him down for parts and sell him off for a bunch of picks? Like, there are so many ways that you could have said, we just want to reset. We're not going to explain why we want to reset, but we're worried about Luka, and we don't think we can get a comparable thing, so we're going to start fresh. It's almost like someone being bored with their fucking dynasty, like, fantasy team. It's like, you know what, I've won, I've done well. I'm going to sell off all my good players and give a bunch of picks and just have fun starting it over again, or doing a franchise or dynasty or whatever in, a video game. But they're not even doing that. It's like they genuinely believe that this is a team that can win. And we joked about the whole, well, you have a better defensive identity. I'm like, who gives a shit in this NBA about defensive identity?
Yeah.
That's the way you're going to win?
Well, and here's the added difficulty. Obviously, in a perfect world, when they're healthy, it would have been interesting to see what the Mavericks could do here. And maybe they get healthy in time and they survive to make a play-in game or something. Who knows? The West is a mess. The Suns are also part of that mess. The Spurs just got better. We'll talk about that in a second. Regardless, Anthony Davis is best alongside a center. And obviously, he never really had that in LA. Yeah, Dwight Howard was fine for them the year they won the title, but that was the very tail end of Dwight Howard's peak, if you even want to call it that. Well, the idea with the Mavericks made some sense on paper, except Daniel Gafford is out for a significant amount of time, and Derek Lively is out for a significant amount of time, and they traded Maxi Kleber in the deal, who wasn't great in the first place, but still, he's gone now. And then, who's the other one I'm blanking on? There's 3. Gafford, Lively, their other big.
Davis and
shit.
God. I thought that was it, but maybe you know more than me.
I'm blanking. There's 3 bigs, and they're all hurt. Oh, Dwight Powell.
Dwight Powell is also hurt. Yeah, okay. I think it's Powell.
So they have no bigs left. Like, they're starting a different Kessler at center right now because they have no bigs whatsoever. PJ Washington, who's played really well for Dallas since they acquired him, is now going to have to slide into like a 4 or a 5 sometimes. So even in the short term, they said that this was a win now and win later move. Both those things can't possibly be true if you're trading a player of Luka's caliber. But the idea that they got better now is probably the silliest part of all this, and it's all quite silly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, like, does Kyrie and AD make sense as a pairing? Maybe. There's some merit to it, and like we know Kyrie can be better more on ball than he has been with the Mavericks. So he was doing well primarily off ball, obviously letting Luka be the primary initiator. But man, I mean, what I keep coming back to, by the way, as I wrap up the last point of this, is like they made the finals last year.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say something was working because they made the finals.
And Minnesota was the same way. They made the Western Conference Finals last year. And then they were like, well, time to make a big splash. And you're like, what? But especially for teams that are young and rising, why the fuck do you need to make any splash?
It's being so. I honestly think it's so like to the same point of the players get impatient and all of a sudden get player empowerment, all that, and it's like, oh, you have like 2 years to get it done, and it's like this dick swinging competition of like, well, we'll show you. before you want to get out, we'll fucking trade you and we'll blow it up before you start to talk shit in the media about how you want to be traded. Cool. That's a really good idea if you actually got fucking value for the guy you were trading away. Because if they got like 9 first-round picks for Luka, it was like the biggest trade ever. And like it shocked everybody, and they pulled off this heist of, and they rebuilt like the Celtics of a decade ago. I'd be like, shit, guys, I can kind of see the point. All right, like you got the biggest haul in the history of the league for a guy you don't trust to give money to because you think he's fat and out of shape all the time. I can hear you out, but we're like 20% of that trade return.
I mean. We'll talk about the Mavericks' future. The Lakers they're gonna be good, and they've got like their future kind of set as far as a cornerstone. But this season, are the Lakers gonna be good because they just ran into a problem when they tried to replace their big this past week, and then got the great Suns legend Alex Len today, which I laughed at so hard. The fact is like that's what they're reduced to for their big.
I mean, best they can do with what's available. Yeah, I mean, the Mark Williams trade was certainly interesting. They shouldn't have had the assets to make it in the first place, but since they didn't give up anything for Luka, they were able to try and kick him away from Charlotte, but then he apparently failed a physical, and then the whole deal was rescinded. We were also concerned that might have happened with Yusuf Nurkic because the players we got back for him, one of them was also pretty significantly injured. Of course, teams can also just choose to okay a deal despite any worries about the physical, in which I think the Suns would have done just to get off of Nurkic's contract, waive the 2 guys, and get under the second apron. In the case of the Lakers, though, there was clearly something that was so wrong that they had to basically be like, no, we don't want this to go through, because if it does, like, we're going to be worse off for it. They also would have given up their last first-round pick, their last trade chip, so it makes sense. That was the scary thing, was like, first of all, it was hilarious watching other rumors leak about that with like, oh, LeBron and AD were asking for help for so long and nothing happened, and then Luka gets here the second he gets here, trading for a big to run the rim for him. And it's like, okay, whatever. You guys can have your little whispers and conspiracy theories. But more importantly, it just goes to show you that the Lakers just do whatever they want. And yeah, they don't have any first-round picks until 2031 now. They weren't going to have any until longer than that if that deal had actually been successful. But it doesn't matter because players always want to play for that franchise, and the prospect of playing with Luka would have attracted some free agent in the near future if and when LeBron retires, unless he plays till he's 50. So one way or another, the Lakers are going to be just fine.
I was going to say, though, how long do you believe that Luka will be on the Lakers for? Like, how many years? Like, do you think it will go well? Do you think he'll age okay? Or do you think that he will end up on another team before he ends like the prime of his career? Because I think he'll end up shipped out of LA. In like another, I mean, it will be a while, but I wouldn't be surprised in like 5 or 6 more years or 4 more years if he's bounced somewhere else.
It depends on how he does keep himself up. If there is that issue with conditioning, he very well might. But it doesn't sound like it. It seems like he's going to be in a place where now, at least for the short term, he seems like he's going to be motivated because he's like, oh, you're going to trade me, like me, Luka, like it's almost that. It was so untouchable out of even a thought process that then when it happened, it's like, oh, I'll show you guys, and he'll get in the best shape he can or something.
Because I think about the end.
Like
I think about the end of LeBron's career and where that roster is, and then it's like, are the Lakers at a similar position that the Mavs are claiming they were in? Of like, well, shit, we don't really know what to do next once LeBron's gone. You have a year or two of trying to build around Luka. Does it work? Does it not? Any of that shit. And I'm curious if the Lakers flip Luka before it's too late to keep perpetuating the cycle that they're living in right now, where it seems like basically they always have someone other than their gap of Kobe's career to LeBron, in that gap of where they had, a million top 5 picks that mostly only turned out to be decent-ish okay players. Again, Ingram's like the best one. I guess Randall's decent. But then they're sending all those guys out, and then none of them play for them. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's...
No, that's lucky.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't understand it. And a lot of people have been trying to wrap around their heads around it for like a week plus now. And in my head, I just kind of keep coming back to like, you don't get players of Luka's caliber in trade or free agency almost ever. Really, I mean, what are the biggest free agent signings of the last few years? Because most of the time it's somebody getting traded or signed and traded. You have the Kevin Durant example with Brooklyn. They had enough cap space to go pursue both Kyrie and Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, of course, coming off a horrendous injury. But that's essentially it. There are other free agent examples. Some people have gotten paid. Don't get me wrong. But, like, not top 5 guys. They don't become available. And at this modern NBA, cap space isn't really a commodity anymore. It's more so like avoiding the more stringent penalties of the first and especially the second apron. But there's only going to be a couple teams that have any kind of meaningful cap space to spend this offseason. For the most part, that happens via sign and trade to make room via getting rid of other assets to take on a contract of that size. So, like, will Luka stay in Los Angeles? I think so, because, like, I mean, if teams for some reason know he's going to be available, maybe they try and figure something out, they clear room, but it's hard to imagine him going anywhere else just because of the current landscape of the NBA.
Well, that's what everyone's figuring out, is that if you spend it's kind of like, a fantasy draft auction where you spend all your money on the top player. It's like, cool, I'm really glad you got that top player. You better hope he's the greatest thing ever, because the rest of your roster's trash. And in the NBA today, with the way everyone's shooting, I mean, almost everybody can handle the ball and shoot at this point. So it's such a problem if you have one guy who's great, but then no one else can do anything. It's the Suns have run into that, where we've had two guys who are great and can score, and that's it. And it doesn't work anymore. You got to have everybody who can contribute in some way or another. And if you just got a bunch of vet men guys, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I was gonna say, considering age and skill, like my first instinct was like Shaq signing with the Lakers. Was at an age point in their career and where they already were. And again, I think Luka's probably, I mean, maybe I misremember. I was young, so what the fuck do I know? I would feel like Luka's a more prominent like player in the NBA than Shaq was at the time of signing with the Lakers. Maybe, or was Shaq already like this dominant of a player?
He had made the finals and beat Jordan. Like,
yeah, I wasn't sure if like where that like kind of landed, but it's like that was the closest comp, and that's 30 something years ago. We're talking about, or 29 years ago.
Yep.
That was the best thought I had of like, when's the last time a player in the NBA changed teams at that age, at that prominence of the league? And it wasn't like, I mean, I guess again, that's free agency, this is a trade, but like that was the closest I could come up with.
I mean, Kevin Durant going to the Warriors would be mine, just because but that was still a weird year because the salary cap went up so much.
That was like the thought process. Like, well, he did that, and it's like shocking in a way, and this and that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess he had the freedom to do it, so it still counts in a way. I think what the follow up, what we've seen is like, oh yeah, I guess he does that though. It's fine.
You have LeBron moving to Miami, and that's also different. There's some collusion there to get multiple stars to go with Dwayne Wade. Those are the only other, like, those are the type of moves, but again, those are all free agency and not trade, which is why this one's so stunning, because it was a team basically saying, we gave up. It wasn't a player choosing to go elsewhere despite maybe being in a good situation and looking for a better one. It was a player having no choice whatsoever in it and being shipped out like it was nothing. And that just, as much as we might dislike Luka, you do have to feel for him a little bit. That's just a tiny, smallest little bit. But again, if I were a Mavs fan, I would be furious. I would be done.
Yeah. I can't. I'm trying to. What would this podcast be like if the equivalent of us trading Booker in 22 would have been? Just been like, oh well, sorry, I guess we're just done with it. Moving on. I feels like something Robert Sarver would have done, but he didn't. Like, that's kind of the shocking thing. This feels like a Robert Sarver move that never happened.
Yeah, I mean, if we get the Kevin Durant trade in reverse, if we get two good young players and 4 first-round picks and a pick swap, then maybe I'm still pissed off, but I might not be over it. If we got Jamal Murray and 1 pick, then yeah, I'd be done being a Suns fan.
Yeah. God, that would be the equivalent of it. But oh God, that'd be a bad equivalent. But no, my sister's boyfriend is a big Mavericks fan, and she was texting me on that night saying that I need to console him. He's in shambles. I'm like, at the time I was big fuck Luka, fuck the Lakers, so I didn't really have much sympathy. And the next day I was like, oh God, he must be absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
Like, this is awful.
Yep. That's the stuff that, when you have a guy who's tied to your franchise, we want to show loyalty as much as possible. It's hard to do in the modern NBA. NFL moves around a lot. There's a lot of folks that are constantly jumping around. So it's really rare to have somebody who really seems to have an investment to your specific city and franchise, and then you just move it for a mercenary and make yourself worse. And we spent 40 minutes and we still can't really wrap our heads around it. That's the hardest part about it.
It's the shock that kills you on that too, because like some people know that their superstar is probably going to leave. They're going to get to free agency. You understand, like, you're concerned. Like, Cavs fans had to know that LeBron might stab them in the back on national TV and announce he was bailing on them. It's another two, literally. I mean, and shit, some Mavs fans were asleep when this happened.
Yep.
because of
Oh, yeah.
the time zone differential and all that.
Yep.
People woke up the next morning to the news that their favorite player on their favorite team that they had thought they had another decade of was gone. And just overnight, it was over. And that I will never be able to understand. Like, I'm a Patriots fan. I knew Tom Brady was going to leave. I understood, like, yeah, this is probably it. I bet he's probably going to sign somewhere else. It's like, you start to come to terms with it over time as the writing's on the wall. It's one thing for this to be a shock to the NBA and no one else knew. It's like, dude, if all these people were just like, there's no indication that you're about to see Luka's last game.
Can you imagine? I was 10, 1995, huge Charles Barkley, huge Kevin Johnson fan. If they would have just up and traded Kevin Johnson in 1995, I might have broken down crying and just like been inconsolable for a day at that point in my life because I loved it that much. I can imagine there's some 10-year-old in Dallas right now, or last week, that was at that point where he was just like can't understand what's going on to the point of tears.
You lose fans. I mean, that's the whole point. You lose people being like, well, shit, I guess if that's the case, then I'm a kid in Dallas. I'm like, well, why am I going to cheer for that team? They're just going to – I can never trust that franchise, that ownership. I'm not going to be a fan of theirs. Why the fuck – why would I believe anything they say?
They'll be a Lakers fan.
Yeah.
They'll quite literally go be a Lakers fan. And
exactly.
It's
it's like, shit, great, there's more of them.
And well, I feel like this effect has been slightly overstated in the sense that money talks in the NBA, and if the right opportunity came along, someone would go there. But it does hurt your chances with free agents. It has to. Mm-hmm. Because any other team – is going to offer a better opportunity just because they might not stab you in the back. If you're a prominent free agent and all of a sudden the Mavs have money to spend because maybe it's when AD's contract expires or whatever, that has to be in the back of your mind. If it's still the same ownership and they haven't been run out of town by then, you have to then think to yourself, would that happen to me if they soured on me?
Which is a funny transition to maybe one of the next points you're going to make is because you warned me of this. This was Miami's conundrum with Jimmy Butler. You said they can't totally treat Jimmy like shit because then will that hurt their reputation going forward? Even though I'm like, it's Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra who've done a great job. I'm like, why would I? Because Butler's a malcontent. Why would I, as a player, look at them negatively and be like, I don't want to go there? But your point was right. Like Miami had to be delicate about that for the exact reason you're saying Dallas might have knifed themselves right now.
Yep.
And that was a crazy situation of Butler trying to force his way to the Suns, never being able to, saying he'd only play for the Suns, and that's the only thing, and then getting traded and in 45 seconds signing a 2-year extension for $120 million. It's like, well, so much for the only playing for the Suns part.
Money talks, Dave. Chris just said it.
Might as well get to the rest of the trade deadline then. The Suns are coming up in this one, only in the sense that they didn't really do anything. They got off Yusuf Nurkic's contract to duck the second apron next season, which is smart. Because whether they want to try and rebuild one last time or blow it up, they're going to need the flexibility of not being in the second apron to do it. Now, for a lot of people, that was not adequate, which I get, at least as far as my heart. But my head was sort of like, I don't know what anybody expected. Once Butler was gone and sent to Golden State because no one wanted to facilitate the Bradley Beal contract, I don't know what you thought was going to happen. If nobody wanted to trade for Bradley Beal as part of a Butler deal, who was also disgruntled and wanted to come here, what other miracle player was going to come available that was going to move the needle? I don't know. I think people just had their expectations that something would happen and nothing did. The Suns walk away with 2 bad players from the Hornets, and that's about it. And their goal is basically to improve internally, which is possible, but pretty damn unlikely. They're already going to miss my wins projection, and the other 2 are not far off.
No, it's once again, like the fact we went 45 minutes and barely touched on the Suns, and after going the entirety of this season after the preview episode not talking about the Suns really is a statement of where they are right now. It's such a weird thing. If you look at their them on paper, you're like, damn, this is a pretty talented team. They should be really good. And then you look at the record and like, how the hell are you 500? Like, how are you 500? This is gross. And, you look at sometimes the injuries and stuff like that. And then when Kevin Durant was out, they had a terrible record. And then, but even in the past, few weeks when he has been available, they haven't really played that well. Like, it's not been great. So we just have a flawed team, it seems.
They're 1-11 without Kevin Durant.
Yeah, it's not good.
Their record is about a 620 win percentage with both Booker and Durant playing, but both are injury prone, so it's not really fair to even look at that as a high upside potentially. And what's become clear is that this is multiple seasons now where we've looked at the role players they've picked up, given the restraints that they have because of the salary cap, the aprons, etc., and been like, well, that's pretty good considering like that's a decent fit. Yuta Watanabe might be a good spot up shooter when he's getting looks off of like Booker and Durant actions. And he didn't even make it the whole season without being dumped, and he's out of the league now. Jordan Goodwin, same situation, basically out of the league at this point. I think he just actually got some run with the Lakers, weirdly enough. I think because they were so shorthanded on roster spots with people hurt and being traded. But the point is, like, we keep seeing like these other players. Okay, like Tyus Jones, talked about him a lot in the preview. A good fit, especially for the veterans minimum, which is still true, by the way, but has been exposed tremendously as a defender, especially with an already undersized lineup around him. So you can find the best pieces available, but if they don't form a cohesive unit, it doesn't really work in the modern NBA anymore. The 3 best teams in the league, well, let's look at them. The Thunder, extremely young depth, some recurring players over multiple seasons. The Cavaliers, young, talented. That starting lineup is about as good as anybody. And again, some pretty good bench players, and they just got DeAndre Hunter to upgrade over Karis LeVert. And the Celtics, the best starting 5 in basketball. Really no weaknesses in that starting 5 except for a couple other injury risks there. And decent depth as well, but also players that know how to play within a system, buy in. And it's just not happening here. It's not happening in a couple other places that had 2 big stars. The Lakers are another example. So I guess at this point, it's got to be about roster construction, but it has to be finding the right role players. And that's not easy to do when you have to pay them all minimum contracts, but some teams have figured it out.
And those teams that I think you talked about right there, they built up this big old stable of picks for years and years, and then they already got their superstars out of drafting, so then they didn't have to flip a bunch of capital. It's like, feels like some of those teams they've hit on role players here and there in the draft as opposed to having to go find the guys I think you're talking about in a way. I mean, that's not a 1-for-1 exactly, but then you get some guys who are role players in your draft, and then you flip them because they're young and valuable. It's like what you just talked about with the Thunder, why they would be a team that could have gotten Luka in the first place, because they did exactly that.
Well, and the Thunder were a unique situation because they had the good young players and then got even more good young players. And they sucked for a while. Don't get me wrong, they sucked for a while, but they didn't suck because they meant to suck, kind of like the 76ers did in the mid 2000s, of which they really only got Embiid out of that, so it kind of didn't work.
Good point.
But like they kind of sucked because they're like, okay, we're going to bottom out and we're going to accumulate all these draft assets. But then when the timing was right, they traded their big player, and yeah, they sucked for like 3 years, and now they're the best team in the league for now and for the future. Like, I don't know a team that's better stocked for the next 10 years.
Sometimes just growing pains. It's like, oh shit, like we're a really young roster. We kind of have to learn how to play in the NBA together, and rather than being like, oh shit, it's not working after 1.5 years, we better start shifting all the chairs around on the deck and figure out how to piece it together. It's like they kind of just let it breathe a little bit, and maybe being in Oklahoma City in a smaller market, that's just easier to do. You can hide a little bit. No one has these expectations of you. Again, they happened to fluke their way into 3 great players when they drafted them years ago, but then they moved from Seattle, they blow all that up, and et cetera. It's just like maybe that pressure just makes it easier to sort of work your way through it. I guess Cleveland's kind of in a similar sense. Again, if Cleveland doesn't have LeBron be born in Ohio, that franchise's is like vibe is a whole different thing, honestly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all a combination of luck and timing, and even with the Celtics, look at what they've failed to do successfully on their way to this success. Kyrie Irving, we talked about him earlier, pretty much a failure, just an abject failure. Gordon Hayward, pretty much an abject failure, not his fault. I mean, his foot fell off his foot 6 minutes into his first game, but like that didn't go well, so they had to retool around Tatum and Brown, and eventually they ended up with this configuration that's very, very good. For the Thunder, it is going to be interesting to see, like, at what point do you pull the trigger? You can't afford to keep drafting all these players. Like, yeah, you want to take as many swings as possible because they're a controllable young talent. But at some point, if they don't win the title this year, there are going to be whispers about, okay, what do we do to upgrade this roster? These young players are great, but if they fail twice, now, of course, the team that took them out last year has been dismantled, so maybe they won't have that problem. Can the Thunder beat the Celtics? Who knows? It'd be a fascinating finals. So the point is, and even like the Cavaliers were not far off from just losing Donovan Mitchell. There were a lot of whispers about him either leaving or needing to trade him before he left. They stayed the course. They kept their core together, and it worked. Or at least they've had some success. I mean, they haven't won a title yet, but it doesn't matter. At this point, you just have to put yourself in the best position you can, and all 3 of those teams are both good now and at least good for a couple more years, and as Dave said, the Thunder might be good for 10. Who knows?
It's about avoiding compounding mistakes, which I believe you guys, unfortunately... I mean, you have only so many moves to make. You want to pull Beal in because he's a desperation type of attempt, and it's just gone, unfortunately, about as bad as you could have. I mean, anyone maybe imagined it could be.
Fair or not, we already talked to the Luka and Ayton thing to death, but that number 1 pick essentially has turned into Grayson Allen and 2 useless players. That's very, very oversimplified, but it's also true. So like that was a number one pick that you would at least hope, well, maybe he didn't like realize expectation, but you traded him to somebody else who saw the upside and you got some stuff out of it. Well, the lineage of that basically ends up with Yusuf Nurkic dying in Charlotte. And yeah, Grayson Allen's been good and he's been very good the last few weeks, but like that's not what you're hoping to get out of that.
And it's killer. I mean, again, I don't cite people at fault for like taking chances and things like that. It's just when they go bad, and then if not everyone's not making bad mistakes, and other teams like you just pointed out, those handful are getting lucky and it's working out. Well, you just change the hierarchy in 2 years. All of a sudden, you're down around 7, 8, 9, and those teams who are 7, 8, 9 are now 1 or 2, and just it happens that quick, especially with rosters that are this small in this league.
There was something I heard on the radio earlier saying like, if you could rescind, with the fact that the Lakers trade being rescinded, is like if you could rescind one Suns trade, what would it be? And the funny thing is, the guys on the radio, at least the hosts, were basically saying like, I still wouldn't rescind the Kevin Durant trade. Like,
no.
And I'm the same boat. Like, it worked out about as terribly as it could. Maybe you consider rescinding Bradley Beal trade just because of what it meant, and it was the risks of taking on the the no trade clause in the contract. But even so, like, I still don't even think that's a bad trade. It just didn't work. And that's the thing that I think fans lose sight of so much, is that when it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it was bad.
No.
Patrick Mahomes had a bad game. That doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, as I've seen lately, which is like, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Chris just said you have a 625 win percentage when Durant's in your lineup. So you bet on Durant being in your lineup more often than you're a 625 win percentage team. Like, it's that simple of a fucking prospect. You didn't cripple your team's future by trading, for Bradley Beal, other than like his contract's tough. But like, you didn't send all these picks and it's like, oh my God, we've now bottomed out. We're stuck with Bradley Beal. It's like, no, you're just not a title contender, but you're still a not horrendous team. You could be worse. Now, granted, maybe people would argue I'd rather bottom out and not be stuck in the purgatory middle of that. But you also can't sit here and say this set us back years and years. Not really. You're just missing some of Booker's prime, unfortunately, but also so are a lot of teams who have good players.
Yeah. I think what I keep going back to is, we took the most games off the Nuggets the year they won the title. Hang the banner. We did it. We won 2 games. But that team was not any better as far as roster construction, as far as the pieces into it. I mean, TJ Warren was getting minutes for that team. Terrence Ross was getting minutes for that team. Landry Shamet was getting way too many minutes for that team. Like, that team was not any better than talent-wise than this current team is. But it may not matter, because at the end of the day, a lot of what like Bradley Beal and a couple other players bring to the table overlaps too much with what Booker and Durant already do. And so we have to kind of eat our predictions, because again, I think technically if they won every game left, I would be right, because it's 25-25. So if they won out, they'd be 57-25. So I actually still am alive, thank you. But unless they finish at least 30-2, all of us are going to be wrong about our projections by a pretty wide margin. And we're just going to accept the fact that we did see an idealized version of this team that I think exists somewhere in the multiverse, but the reality was too far away from the ideal.
You're unfortunately 26-26.
Damn it. All right, well then everybody else is in play except for me.
Sorry.
Sweet, let's just go undefeated the rest of the way. That's possible.
As you're 11th in the West with the Spurs right behind you.
Yes.
And they're coming for us.
Yeah,
that's
probably.
All right. I mean, the Mavs have to fall off eventually, right? How many more players can get hurt?
I mean, to be fair, you're already only a game back of the Mavs, so I'm pretty sure you'll be there pretty soon.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the most difficult part.
Plus, Sacramento's going to fall back too. So.
There's a lot of frustration among Suns fans, and I get it. Expectations were high, and when they're high, they're always disappointed. When you don't meet them, where it's like the finals run was lower expectations, and we exceeded them. But I've seen some dumbass takes about a lot of things with the Suns, and I don't even want to go into all of them. It's not worth the airtime, but just, like, oh, I can't. Like, a lot of people keep pining for that team. It's like that team died the second they didn't give DA the extension. That team was dead. It didn't exist. Even when it was still the same roster together, the idealized version of that team you think you saw died then. And then it died again when it was still hanging on by a thread when Chris Paul aged 10 years in one day. And that was it. Everything that happened was kind of like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
Given the constraints of what they had, it was either Jordan Poole or Chris Paul or Bradley Beal. Those were the 3 choices. All of those would have been horrible choices. At least with Jordan Poole, you might have... Well, Jordan Poole's actually been decent this season, but he was god-awful last year. You could argue he was the worst player in basketball last season. So, I don't know. I mean, I get the disappointment. I'm not thrilled about any of it either. I've sort of checked out for the last month or so already. I don't know how I would have felt about a Jimmy Butler trade. That's why I wasn't really that invested in the trade deadline, because I didn't honestly know if I wanted him or not. So I just go through the rest of the season going through the motions, and when they play well, it's fun to watch the highlights of like Booker and Durant and the rest of the team playing together. And when they don't, I won't watch.
Little moments like watching the end of the Jazz game the other night are fun. It's like, hey, look at that. But he also struggled to beat the Jazz, who are one of the worst teams in the league. So
Yeah, they just got blown out last night by the Lakers, for example. So
yeah,
They are indeed 12-40. So you're right. They are they're pretty far down there.
And we beat the Wizards. So again, hang the banner, but barely.
The
so
Wizards who don't have double-digit victories yet.
Yeah,
Correct.
And I'm glad we didn't end up doing a show early in the season, because we started 8-1, and so everything was looking great for our predictions and everything else so far. But there were cracks showing. None of those games were easy wins at all. None of them. None of the 8. And it took a lot of stuff from especially Durant, but also Booker in the clutch to do it. And it turns out that those were like the canary in the coal mine. The signs were there, and it all started to fall apart really quickly after that. That's about all I got to talk about the trade deadline. Like, yeah, De'Aaron Fox went to the Spurs, and that's a steal for them for what they gave up, and it makes sense to pair him with Wemby, and good on them. And it's kind of baffling the Kings don't have Fox or Halliburton now, so I don't know what the fuck they're doing. But that doesn't really matter. And
I mean, it's like, thankfully Luka's trade makes it that where that's not the saddest franchise fan base there is, because that team has just gotten deconstructed itself, and it's just like, see, that team, move that fucking team to Las Vegas.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Exactly. Like, that team's history is just sad.
If the Maloofs are still there, they would, but
Well, I always thought, I mean, for years and years, I was like, why are the Kings not in Las Vegas when the Maloofs own this team and they have a casino out there? And there were so many. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. But yeah, I mean, the Kings fans are, no one's feeling bad for them, because everyone's too busy feeling bad for Mavs fans. As we also now, cool. The two big heist trades were the fucking Spurs and the fucking Lakers. So what year is it? It's just wonderful, isn't it?
2008 all over again.
And you know what? Good on the Warriors is the last thing I'm going to say. Like, they got Jimmy Butler and we didn't. They took a chance. And maybe Butler's going to be terrible for them next season or beyond, when it's no longer about getting paid anymore or whatever. But I will always give teams credit for trying to win. I'm so sick of fucking tanking. I'm so sick of ownership throwing away things just to be as bad as possible to get draft picks that they're not ultimately going to try and pan out anyways. They won a title in 22. That's not that long removed from 22. And they could have easily just been like, well, we're just going to let kind of like Steph and Draymond fade into the background. They took a swing. And respect to them for doing that and paying Steph back for his loyalty, and I guess Draymond, but especially Steph. And they're 2-0 since they got him. It's extremely early. We're not going to worry about that too much, but they've looked like a different team with him, so who knows? And again, was I thrilled not to get Butler? I honestly don't know, but good on Golden State for trying.
The money looks funny, but then, yeah, when you're like, well, it's only 2 or 3 years of having this guy, and then you can move on, and it's okay, well, you capitalize on the last couple years. Like, how quickly can Jimmy get grumpy? Is your question. It's like, because I think if it's not for his attitude that he's run himself out of however many franchises, I think you guys should be more disappointed you don't get him. But you also are like, are we getting 30 games of him before he's pissed off? Like, before he doesn't like it here or doesn't want to be here, and he gets there and say, oh, I want to go to only the Suns. And it's like, that sure changed real quick. Is the example of how quickly he could have gotten to Phoenix. And then by the end of the year, if you guys were the 7th seed and got bounced right away, maybe he'd be like, yeah, I don't actually want to be here after all. I think one of the funny things that, came out of all that deadline for you guys was Durant just straight up saying more or less, no, I just want to be here. I don't need to.
Yeah, I'd rather be here. I don't want to go back to Warriors.
And again, whatever that means in terms of he doesn't want to be with Draymond, a teammate with Draymond, or maybe that would have been the trade anyways, and Draymond comes there. I'm just gonna say it's refreshing for someone to just pretty much say, especially in Durant's history, of no, I want to be here. Yeah. And that's that. And that's the win I would take out of that.
And people want to trade everything, Durant and Booker, and blow everything up. And again, I understand the frustration, but if Devin Booker doesn't want to be traded, you don't trade him.
Don't trade him. No, not at all.
You don't, because you're not going to find anything better unless you can dupe the Mavs into giving you a top 3 player for no reason. But I think that ship has already sailed, weirdly enough. So anyways, that's the trade deadline of the NBA. What if the Suns have to do going forward? I don't know. It'd be a shock if they made the play-in. And if they do, they probably get bounced quickly. But who knows? The NBA, things happen fast. I'm not wishing this on anybody because I like SGA, but the Thunder are not going anywhere without SGA this year. As good as their other players are, there's no chance. So, anything can happen quickly. You can acquire a nice 30-year-old center and have him break his leg in 3 quarters and change. Everything can happen quickly. So
you can also, get hot with Durant and Booker for a 20-game stretch. Like, I mean, I'm not saying like, look, you can make a run to the title, but you sit here as in the play-in tournament and they're healthy and you get hot. Who's to say you're not in the Western semis? I mean, it's not that out of the question.
They were a game under 500, like 40 games into the season last year. It's possible. It's just there's no reason to believe there's any momentum to that this year. But those two are really good, and if they can get healthy and catch the right, because we kept hearing about the strength of schedule last year and strength of schedule, and they still performed well in the second half. It's the same thing this year. And you know what? This team, I talked about this with Sean on the way home as we wrap up. This team plays to the levels of its competition. It has pretty much ever since Kevin Durant arrived here. So maybe it's a good thing the schedule's hard. Like, light a fire under your ass. Bring it against good competition and stop sleeping through fucking Wizards games. Not to name any specific example.
Oh, yeah.
All right, that is it for this episode. We'll be back next week with another live one. You can tune in. You can join us. There'll be a trivia show on the horizon somewhere soon. Not yet, but soon. And plenty of other stuff coming up as well. Sean's got a bunch of stuff planned, and we have all sorts of things to get to. And we'll also have Dave in town here pretty soon. I don't know if we're going to do that in addition to or on the side of whatever, but a McDonald's tier list is coming pretty soon here. So stay tuned for that as well as we make ourselves sick and die.
Hooray.
I'm ready.
All right. Give me a McChicken.
In between episodes, you can find us at our website, grayareas.live or youtube.com/@grayareaslive. We will see you next week.